Kechi Hila Anchimaka. I love you, Mother Earth.
Brothers and sisters, this video is about how our Aboriginal indigenous people of this land, now called America, were lied to, by Moors, that we looked up to, that look like us, respected, that taught us about their history of only good deeds of enlightening the Europeans in their dark ages, bringing them to light with the arts, sciences, law, etc., when in reality, with their European friends, they crossed the Atlantic and conquered by killing our people, colonization, taxed by tributes, occupied our land, and brought most of our clans, bands, and tribes to literal ruins. The Moors brag about their being mothers and fathers of civilization, yet committed atrocities against benevolent Aboriginal and Indigenous people in taking our land as a Moorish empire, bringing their foreign civics dogma, and forcing us into what they call a civilized condition, meaning a state of being reclaimed from the rudeness of savage life, in which they themselves committed savage acts to bring Indigenous people already of goodwill to become their civilized subjects, which is the part they didn't tell us about, and then propagated the big lie, that all Aboriginal Indigenous people are Moors. Remember, all empires are made by bloodshed. The etymology of empire is territory subject to an emperor's rule, dominion, supreme power in governing, imperial power, generally of the Roman Empire. I will now read from pages 445 through 447 of the 1892 book titled, History of the Conquest of Spain by the Arab Moors, Volume 2, a sketch of the civilization which they achieved, and imparted to Europe, by Henry Capet. Start page 445. Here let us observe a moral application of mechanical forces in history. The tide of men that had poured down to the conquest of Granada, now at last unchecked by obstacles within the kingdom, rushed across the Atlantic in the wake of Columbus to San Salvador and Hispaniola, which is Haiti, with Ponce de Leon, and Fernando de Soto, to Florida, and the Mississippi, with Cortez, to Mexico, with Pizarro, and Almagro to Peru, with Balboa, to the infinite vista of the Pacific. It was the reconquest still, which could not abate its momentum, of the Americas. Christopher Columbus, the Moor, found in his name, the claim of his first great duty. Loyal to his sovereigns, he was the Christ-bearer, and the dove, the carrier dove of Christianity, to the uttermost parts of the earth. But from Christian Spain, he brought only evil to the Aborigines. It was the inquisition of a fierce propaganda. It was grinding labor. It was cruelty, which could only end in extermination, of the natives. What he dispensed of Moorish civilization was only good. The inventions and discoveries they had introduced. His vessel was fitted out in that little port of Palos, the place from which Columbus set sail in 1492, eventually reaching America, which had lately been a Moorish port. His sailors were many of them men with Moorish blood in their veins. It has been asserted that, when the Moors were driven out, thousands took refuge in the south of France, who, afterwards abhorring the Roman Catholic persecutions, became Huguenots, and that of these many emigrated at a later date to South Carolina. Stop page 445. Brothers and sisters, this book is showing us that the mission of Moors was to propagate, quote-unquote, Christianity, to the uttermost parts of the earth. Is that why they advocate the Bible book? Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater? The Moors, calling themselves Huguenots, colonized South Carolina colony. Why didn't they teach us this? Remember, etymology of reconquest is, a second or repeated conquest, a recovery by conquest. Meaning, subjugation or conquering of the Aboriginal Indigenous Amaru companions, Americans by an armed force of Moors. The Moors that fled to France, called themselves Huguenots. Remember, the French were colonizers of our land. Etymology of propaganda is, Committee of Cardinals in charge of foreign missions of the Catholic Church. The word propaganda is short for Latin, or Moorish Latin, as we were taught. Congregatio de Propaganda Fide. Translated as, Congregation for Propagating the Faith. A committee of cardinals established 1622 by Gregory XV to supervise foreign missions. Start page 446. Be that as it may, the Spaniards had found for the world a virgin land, the Americas, in which to introduce Spanish errors, and especially Spanish bigotry, and the great tide rushed in from Protestant Europe to occupy it. The Americas, here I lay down my pen, leaving to the intelligent reader the easy, and pleasant task of further tracing the philosophy, and pointing the moral of this strange, eventful history. It may indeed seem far removed by distance and time from present interests, and the great social problems of our day and country. But, it deserves special consideration as a striking illustration of the important historic principle that humanity is the same in all ages. That the moral unity of mankind is the first, last, and best lesson of human annals, whether we look under the horned helmet, and cuirass of the Goth, under the twisted turban of the Arab, or the fez of the Moor and Berber. Whether in the marts of Cordova, on the Change of London, or in Wall Street of New York. In the 8th century, or the 19th, the feeling heart and busy brain of man work from the same causes, by the same data, to the same ends. Love and hate, religious fanaticism, self-interest, the greed of wealth and the lust of power, are springs of action which the moral standard of conscience cannot fully control, but never ceases to judge. And to the student of history it is most interesting to observe that the golden rule applies in all ages and to all conditions of humanity. Stop page 446. Brothers and sisters, for peace of mind and liberty, we must realize that no people are greater or lesser than another. Moorish, or Albion European, etc. However, the religions of empire, imperialism, politics, nationalism, still, lust for conformity and, to be the ruling class of nationality, and people who believe in it. We must realize that we are only taught what the foreign conquering factions want us to know in order to gain allegiance of whose minds they have yoked, thus, the consenting, who are then easy to subject in mind and body, then assimilated to an unnatural system of subjugation that becomes normal to them. Not liberated as we were before they came. In any case, there is no liberty. The empire's new clothing to cover itself, is the so-called Great Reset, the cryptocurrency, as fish bait. Many are falling in this prepared global economic fiction trap. Start page 447. My neighbor is not alone the living man, anywhere in the world, with whom I may come in contact today, but the Arab Moor of this history, who requires at my hands a just judgment, and a forgiving spirit. Thus the spirit of enlightened historic criticism must rise superior to the prejudices of race, and creed, and nationality, which the Spaniards have not done. In their historic judgment of the Moors, they have perpetuated the reconquest. They thrice slay the slain. They have been unjust, unmanly, and unchristian. The last lesson to which I shall refer is taught as freshly by this history as though the story was of yesterday. The long-continued influence of human action. As from a stone thrown into a lake, the ripples would go on forever, were they not limited by the shore, and even then they receive from this restraint a resurgence which, while it complicates the problem, demands recognition. I have, in the course of this work, found occasion to present certain remarkable parallels. The careful reader of Spanish history will find all the elements of the earlier days at work in the later times, and still influential in Spain. In the north, the Goth still displays his blue blood and white skin, and with them his Teutonic independence. The isolated valleys of Castile and Aragon are still swayed by the Hispano-Roman, and, the yet vital Celtiberian. In the south, in spite of Spanish disclaimers, the Moorish blood still shows itself beneath a swarthy complexion and under crisp, curling black hair. End page 447. Brothers and sisters, as much as we want to experience liberty by external monsters, such as empires, imperialism, and their nationality prejudice, that keep resurrecting, etc., however is halted by natural instinct of the Aboriginal indigenous peoples, as with the stone's throw in the lake whose ripples are stopped by the shore. By nature, fictional liberty will never be, because by nature, these monsters are only fiction. Liberty comes from within. Not from external sources conforming to robotic behaviors, living one's life to suit foreign ideas, as in a herd, and regurgitated ideas labeled as knowledge. Civil disobedience to the foreign civilization and its civics indoctrination is key to liberty, and demands recognition. Quote, paraphrased. Monsters exist, but they are too few in number to be truly dangerous. More dangerous are the ordinary men and women, the functionaries ready to believe, obey, and to act without asking questions. End quote. Brothers and sisters. Just like the natural seed that produces a mature plant, the natural man, woman, and our offspring children, are unique creators that craves natural cultivation, nourishment, and expression. We only need to realize that truth to live good fulfilled natural lives in our own creative cultures for ourselves.